Hey everyone, for everyone that doesn't know me, I am Jeff Bloodworth. I work with the Albuquerque Police Department. With me is Nils Rosenbaum and our presenter, Ferris Simmons. Before we get started with the presentation with Ferris, we're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Dr. Rosenbaum, who is a psychiatrist with the Albuquerque Police Department. He's going to give a quick little talk or didactic, and then it'll tie into the story that Ferris will then present. So we will go ahead and we will start with you, Doc.
Sure. There we go. Okay, today I'm going to be talking about cumulative trauma, and that's the straw that broke the camel's back as part of cumulative trauma. So people often think of trauma as one major event, and that is true, and that one major event can change someone's life for the worse sometimes, and actually sometimes for the better, but usually for the worse. So per studies, and you guys, if someone wants to type in their guesses, per studies, what are among the most traumatic situations for police? Like not the most common, the most traumatic that you can imagine. Anybody want to guess? And you can also just speak too, you don't have to type it in.
Divorce.
Divorce is a good one. Anybody else? Let's get one more guess.
Baby deaths.
Children's death is definitely in there. So divorce is very traumatic, but it's not.
Homicide, OIS, officer death.
Officer death, very good. I mean, very good. Yes, that's the correct answer. So being present when a coworker is killed, intentionally or accidentally, being held hostage. So these are things that most people hopefully don't go their whole career with facing. Being in a life-threatening, large-scale man-made disaster. And man-made is very important because if it's a flood or it's a hurricane, you don't have anybody to blame. It's just psychologically as much easier to deal with than if someone actually tried to kill a bunch of people. Making a mistake that led to injuries or death of a coworker, and then, as you said, the death of children. So these are the ones that are very difficult to escape unscathed psychologically. These are the ones that are most likely to cause PTSD, even if they happen just once. Okay, what about cumulative stress? These are stressors at a lower intensity, like a divorce. I mean, divorces are bad, but they're not as bad as being kidnapped, hopefully. And they're chronic and they pile up. So this is that old adage of the frog not knowing that it's being boiled and you slowly turn up the temperature. I read that that's in fact not true. Frogs will jump out of the water. So they do better than people. So, but we say things like, oh, it's just a job, seeing dead bodies and seeing all this trauma. It's just part of the job, and people fighting with me. That stuff's nothing. But it builds up, and it becomes problematic over the course of a career. And it could be just as traumatic as one of these major critical incidents. Frequent mild stressors could create stress levels if not dealt with effectively on an ongoing basis. So sort of dealing with it and purging these bad feelings and these anxieties as you go along, as opposed to just, oh, it's no big deal. So cumulative stress are less dramatic, more gradual, but they can lead to PTSD and without a specific trigger. And that can be very difficult, for example, if you're trying to get like workers' comp or something. You're like, well, when was the event? When did you get hurt? You're like, I got hurt. Every freaking call out, I was getting pummeled, that kind of thing. So it's hard to point to one, but generally we pick one anyway. What are some of the cumulative stress reactions? Same stuff as PTSD, but a little bit different because there's more of a burnout, more of a detachment, irritability, anxiety, elevated levels of cortisol because you're constantly under stress, and that leads to weight gain. And then that negative thinking is another big one. The world is terrible. Albuquerque's a shithole. Everybody's out to get me. And, there might be some truth.
A little bit of a dumpster.
Gradual buildup might also be due to like the relentlessness of the exposure. So you see this bad event and it affects you a little bit, but then you see it again and again and again, and then you just can't deal with it anymore. Inability to escape is sort of the same thing. So you can't just say, no, I'm not going to take that call because it reminds me of another call and it's too stressful. And often the most rewarding work requires that of you, to see this trauma. The ones where you're fighting bad guys and stopping crimes, that's where you want to be, but that can be very stressful. And it also can go unnoticed and unacknowledged, these little stressors, because they're little stresses, it's not a big deal. So, no one pulls you aside like, are you okay? If it was just a domestic violence or something, nobody might talk to you. Even though the kid was in the corner crying, no one was hurt, no one was killed, but that's stressful. And then undoing is another way these things build up. So let me talk about undoing. Undoing leads to repeated trauma, trying to relieve the event and make it right. So something bad happened, like a domestic violence, and there was a kid in the background, and you realize the kid's still in that terrible situation. So a week later, you're saying, I'm going to take every DV call and I'm going to fix this. I'm going to undo the bad things that happened. And what happens? DV calls suck, right? And so it just happens again and again, and you're constantly chasing your trail, trying to undo something that can't be undid. Is that a word?
Undone.
Thank you. Okay. Cumulative trauma can lead to PTSD symptoms. So those other symptoms are very similar to PTSD, but they're slightly different. And the final straw phenomena can happen. So you're dealing with DV, you're dealing with this call, that call, whatever it is. And then what seems to be a mundane call just sets you off. Maybe that kid looks just like your nephew, and you don't even realize it, and you just freak out and you can't sleep that night and you're yelling at your wife and you just don't know why. So this one call could just be grabbing, and this is the idea, the stress and the cumulative trauma, you try to build up a dam so it doesn't overwhelm you. And so if you can look at the dam right there, there's little areas to relieve some of the water. And that's what you need to do. You need to purge these painful things that are happening to you. That's either talking to your family, talking to your coworkers, talking to a therapist, whatever it may be. You need to get it out. You need to discuss it. This is true for 95% of people, that talking is going to help a lot. But we don't all do that. And then what happens instead, the levee breaks, and then you're all effed up. And now you have full on PTSD. And so you want to take care of this as it goes along. Okay, these are just the diagnostic criteria for PTSD: negative mood, hyperarousal. It has to last at least a month. It's not caused by other things. It causes you to avoid places like, I'm not going to go to that neighborhood, or I'm not going to go to that Walmart, or I'm not going to, et cetera, et cetera. And then the memories can start to intrude. So you're just walking down the street and then bam, you think of that little kid. And it feels foreign. It feels like it's been placed there. It feels vexing. And this can lead to PTSD. So I'm just going to go quickly through the PTSD symptoms. And this is a checklist. If you have enough of these symptoms, you have PTSD. So unwanted memories that just pop up when you don't want them. These are things intruding on you, intruding onto your psyche, nightmares. Distress when you see any reminder. So your heart starts racing if you see a kid that looks like that other kid. Chronic stress can be a hodgepodge of anxiety. Avoidance. So I used to go to the movies with my family all the time, and then I went a little less, and now I never go to the theater. Or, I used to think that Walmart was a diagnostic, but nobody likes to go to Walmart. So if that's your only avoidance symptom, that's fine. But if you're avoiding parties, if you're avoiding going and playing ball with your friends or whatever it is, or avoiding specific neighborhoods or TV shows, negative alterations in cognition and mood. So negative thoughts, that's I'm bad, the future's bad, the past is bad. Blaming, low mood, lack of enjoyment, just feeling isolated, sluggish, not wanting to interact, just wanting to be left alone. Hypervigilance, so that feeling like how this cat is always ready to spring up. If someone walks up behind you, you jump. And that also includes irritability, yelling at people, getting into things, being overly risky, and difficulty concentrating and a hard time sleeping. The good news is people get better. The normal course for PTSD, I shouldn't say normal, a typical course for PTSD is that it gets better to the point that you no longer have PTSD. And what are some coping mechanisms? I don't know if you guys can see that. That's a Krispy Kreme and the cop is crying in front of us. So humor is one way to deal with this. Faith is another way. Telling stories like what we're doing here is a very, very good way of relieving and avoiding PTSD. So if you're out with some coworkers and there was a DV call and you turn to them and like, that really upset me. Seeing that little kid really upset me. That's very therapeutic and can be very helpful. So I've done these pictures before, but it's very hard to find pictures of cops crying. And the only time that you find pictures of cops crying are at funerals generally. And so I found as many as I really could. So the connecting with people is so important. Connecting with those you love, colleagues, friends, a therapist, somebody. You have to keep the line of connection going, and facing the pain. I'm having trouble seeing this because of facing the pain. So instead of avoiding it and damning it, face it. Let it hit you. Feel it. It's unpleasant to feel pain and loss, but if you don't feel it, you're going to feel it later. And all the time waiting to feel it, it's just going to fuck you up. Okay, another cop crying. Cops cry. It's okay. Also, if you're grieving or you're facing some kind of loss or PTSD, it is sometimes helpful to ask yourself, is this helping or hurting? Is it helping or hurting to look through these photos of the person I lost? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But if you don't ask yourself, you won't know. And if you're doing it every day, torturing yourself, yeah, it's not helping you. Allowing, accepting, and supporting. So you have to allow the pain, allow this to happen, accept that the bad things happen, and then look for support from other people. Again, allowing, accepting, supporting. These are two supportive cops and one that's obviously in a lot of distress. People are a lot better at giving support than they are at receiving it, especially cops. And being vulnerable is very hard because that guy's crying and you know he doesn't want to be crying, but it is therapeutic for him to do that and to get that out. This is at a funeral. Again, is it helping or hurting? What actions am I taking? Is not going out with my family tonight helping or hurting? Probably hurting, but you have to ask yourself. So connecting to others, acknowledging and accepting feelings, and doing relaxation techniques, grounding. Grounding just means being where you are now, firmly on the ground. Is this helpful? Establish or reestablish a routine. So if your routine used to be movies and now you don't go anymore, try your best to reestablish those things. Schedule time for things you enjoy. Avoid media coverage. That's true for everybody in any profession, but for police, it's even more important. Obviously, healthy living, avoiding alcohol, and seeking professional help if you need to. That's it. Thank you.